Imagine standing at the edge of a sparkling pool, the cheers of a packed crowd echoing as the orca beside you leaps gracefully on command. The audience, thrilled by the spectacle they've paid good money to see, erupts with excitement. Everything feels perfect. Then in a heartbeat, the mood shifts. The orca's playful energy becomes something darker. Before you can react, its immense jaws close around you, dragging you into the depths. The crowd's cheers turn to screams as the water churns with violence. This was the horrifying reality Jessica Radcliffe faced, a day that transformed her passion into unimaginable terror. But what unfolded next was even more devastating. Jessica Radcliffe seemed destined for a career working with marine animals. Her father, a marine biologist specializing in cetaceans, introduced her to the wonders of the ocean at a young age. Growing up near the Pacific coast, Jessica often accompanied him on research trips, watching in awe as he studied dolphins and whales. Her fascination grew stronger after attending her first orca show at Ocean Haven Marine Park, a facility inspired by the success of SeaWorld and quickly gaining fame near Monterey, California. From that moment, Jessica was determined to become an orca trainer. At just 19, Jessica began working at Ocean Haven, starting as an intern while pursuing a degree in marine biology. Her dedication and natural talent quickly set her apart, and within a year she secured a permanent position as part of the training team. By 21, Jessica had achieved what few her age could claim. She had become the lead trainer for Makalo, the park's largest and most popular orca. At 22 feet long and weighing nearly 12,000 pounds, Makalo was the centerpiece of Ocean Haven's 6 weekly orca shows, drawing thousands of visitors each week. Jessica's bond with Makalo was remarkable, with many colleagues noting their unique connection. While other trainers found Makalo challenging at times, Jessica seemed to bring out the best in him. However, troubling signs began to emerge. Makalo started exhibiting erratic behavior, including increased aggression during feeding sessions, refusal to perform commands, and tail slapping against the tank walls. On one occasion, Makalo lunged at a trainer during feeding, forcing them to leap back from the tank. Yet, around Jessica, Makalo remained calm and cooperative, responding to her commands with precision. Believing she had a special ability to manage Makalo, park management decided she should lead all shows involving him, despite concerns raised by other staff members. On the day of a headline show, Ocean Haven was packed with eager visitors. Families filled the stands, children clutching cotton candy as they eagerly awaited the performance. The buzz of excitement was contagious as the announcer's voice boomed over the speakers, introducing Jessica and Makalo to roaring applause. Jessica stepped onto the platform with a confidence that belied her years, flashing a bright smile at the audience before signaling Makalo to begin. The performance began smoothly, with Makalo completing his routines flawlessly under Jessica's guidance. The orca's massive dorsal fin sliced through the water as he performed each move with precision, following her commands without hesitation. The crowd erupted in applause when Makalo delivered a breathtaking breach, launching his enormous body out of the water and crashing back down in a spectacular splash that drenched the front rows. Children squealed with delight as waves of water surged into the audience, and parents joined in the applause, captivated by the connection between Jessica and the majestic orca. The finale involved Jessica entering the tank for a synchronized swim routine with Makalo, a signature act that thrilled audiences. As Jessica dove into the water, Makalo circled her in what appeared to be a playful manner. But suddenly, without warning, Makalo lunged, clamping his powerful jaws around Jessica's upper torso. The impact was instant and ferocious, knocking the wind out of her. Gasps and screams erupted from the crowd as they watched Makalo thrash her in the water. The trainers on the platform immediately sprang into action. Emergency signals were triggered and distraction techniques were deployed. They threw buoys, ropes, and even fish into the tank, desperately trying to draw Makalo's attention away from Jessica. Two trainers prepared to enter the water with poles to attempt a rescue, but the ferocity of Makalo's movements made it impossible to safely intervene. Jessica was held underwater for over a minute as Makalo twisted and thrashed, his immense strength leaving her no chance to escape. The orca's powerful jaws caused catastrophic internal injuries, including fractured ribs, a punctured lung, and massive trauma to her chest. Blood clouded the water as Jessica's limp body was finally released, floating to the surface. Rescue divers pulled Jessica from the tank within seconds, but the damage was too severe. Attempts to resuscitate her on the pool deck failed, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. Her injuries were later confirmed to include severe blunt force trauma and drowning. As the horrifying scene unfolded, staff worked frantically to evacuate the audience. Panicked cries echoed through the stands as parents shielded their children from the gruesome sight. Many young visitors, some clutching souvenirs from the show, were left visibly traumatized. Several families hurried out of the stadium while others stood frozen in shock, unable to process the tragedy they had just witnessed. The tragedy sent shockwaves through Ocean Haven and the marine park industry at large. Jessica was widely regarded as one of the most skilled and compassionate trainers at the park, with an unparalleled bond with Makalo. Her death left many questioning how such a tragedy could happen, especially with someone who had the closest relationship to the orca. Was it simply a case of Makalo's wild instincts taking over, or were there warning signs that the park failed to address? Colleagues and visitors mourned Jessica as a dedicated trainer whose life revolved around her love for marine animals. Her family held a private memorial service near the ocean where they remembered her passion, her courage, and her devotion to Makalo. But her death also sparked outrage and debate. Could Ocean Haven have done more to prevent this? Should Makalo's previous erratic behavior had been taken more seriously? And most importantly, should orcas even be kept in captivity at all? Following the incident, Ocean Haven Marine Park permanently shut its gates. The decision was made to relocate Makalo to a newly established marine sanctuary off the coast of Washington State, where he could live out the rest of his life in an enclosed ocean environment with minimal human interaction. While it could never replace the vastness of the open ocean, the sanctuary provided Makalo a chance to live more naturally away from the pressures of performing. The tragic loss of Jessica opened many eyes to the dangers of working with orcas. But what if the next victim wasn't even a trainer? At SeaWorld Orlando, a chilling and deeply puzzling incident unfolded, this time involving a visitor. At the heart of it was Tilikum, a massive orca with a haunting past who turned curiosity into a devastating and shocking tragedy. Viewer discretion is advised. This is one of the most confusing and heart-stopping orca encounters you'll ever hear about. It was a quiet July night at SeaWorld Orlando, Florida. During the day, the sprawling park buzzed with families and excitement, but now it lay silent under the faint glow of the moon. The only sounds were the gentle ripples in the tanks where the park's most famous residents rested. In the largest enclosure swam Tilikum, a 12,000-pound orca measuring over 22 feet in length. Known for his immense size and striking black and white patterns, Tilikum was both awe-inspiring and enigmatic, a creature whose sheer presence hinted at raw, untamed power beneath the surface. But this calm was about to shatter with the arrival of an unexpected intruder. Daniel Dukes, a 27-year-old drifter, was a man of contradictions. He had a troubled history marked by drug abuse and a string of petty arrests for offenses like trespassing, theft, and drug possession. While gentle and nature-loving to some, neighbors described him as a kind soul who fed the homeless and cared for wildlife. Others saw a man wrestling with deep personal struggles. Dukes was also prone to impulsive, erratic behavior. In one infamous incident, he broke into the home of Richard Garriott, the creator of the game Ultima, which Dukes was reportedly obsessed with. Rather than fleeing when Garriott fired a warning shot, Dukes bizarrely made his way to the bedroom, stripped down, and climbed into Garriott's bed before being arrested by police. In the days leading up to his fateful encounter with Tilikum, Dukes had been arrested again and was reportedly behaving oddly in the SeaWorld park. While most visitors saw orcas as mere spectacles, Dukes viewed them as spiritual beings, an idea that would ultimately lead him too close to danger. On the day of the incident, Daniel Dukes entered SeaWorld like any other guest, blending seamlessly into the crowds. He wandered the park, taking in the sights, but it was clear that one attraction captivated him more than any other. From the stands overlooking the orca tanks, his gaze remained fixed on Tilikum. While other visitors came and went, chatting and snapping photos, Daniel lingered, watching the massive orca with an intensity that set him apart. As the day drew to a close and the crowds began to thin, Daniel's behavior took on an unusual determination. Despite the barriers and prominent warning signs around the enclosures, he showed no intention of leaving. Whether driven by a yearning for freedom or a misguided belief in forging a deeper connection with the orca, his resolve was unshaken. When the park's gates finally closed and the last visitors filed out, Daniel stayed behind, alone in his thoughts and purpose. With the park now cloaked in darkness, Daniel made his move. The once vibrant SeaWorld, now eerily deserted, transformed into a silent and shadowy expanse. Slipping past security unnoticed, he navigated the grounds with careful determination. As he approached Tilikum's enclosure, the path grew dim, lit only by faint overhead lights. The tank loomed ahead, an enormous shadowy abyss. The only sounds were the low hum of machinery and the gentle sloshing of water against the tank walls, a deceptive calm before the events that would soon unfold. Standing at the edge, Dukes stripped down to his shorts. The night air was cool against his skin, but he felt no hesitation. With a deep breath, he climbed over the barrier and slipped into the water. The surface rippled briefly before settling, leaving nothing but silence. Unbeknownst to Dukes, Tilikum was far from dormant. Beneath the water, the orca stirred, alerted by the disturbance. Years of captivity had dulled Tilikum's connection to the wild, but his instincts remained intact. His massive body moved gracefully through the water, his dark eyes fixated on the figure above. At first, Dukes floated calmly, his movements cautious as he adjusted to the cool water. The tank felt larger than it appeared from the outside, the depths stretching into an unnerving darkness. But as he drifted, a shadow emerged beneath him. Tilikum's presence was immense, his bulk cutting through the water with quiet precision. Dukes was likely unaware of the danger until it was too late. The attack was swift. Tilikum surged upward like a freight train, ramming into Dukes with crushing force. The impact shattered his ribs, leaving him stunned and helpless. Against 12,000 pounds of raw power, survival was impossible. As the water erupted in a chaotic frenzy, Tilikum's jaws clamped down on Dukes in an unexpected place, his scrotum. With a powerful grip, the orca dragged him beneath the surface, pulling him deeper into the tank. The water churned violently as Tilikum thrashed, his movements a chilling combination of instinct and aggression. Within moments, the water stilled again. Dukes' body floated lifelessly as Tilikum circled beneath him, nudging the figure as if trying to make sense of what had occurred. The next morning brought the discovery. Trainers arriving for the day's preparations found the scene horrific. Floating in the tank was the battered body of Daniel Dukes, his injuries severe and unmistakable. It was clear he had met a violent end. The orca's immense jaws had left deep wounds, and the evidence pointed to an attack of overwhelming force. The news spread quickly, leaving the public in shock. Questions swirled around how Dukes had managed to evade security and why he had entered the tank in the first place. Investigators pieced together his actions, uncovering a mix of wanderlust and dangerous curiosity that had led him to the enclosure. Tillicum's role in the incident reignited a firestorm of debate. This was not the first death associated with the orca. His history included other incidents that had raised concerns about his captivity. Critics argued that years of confinement had fostered aggression in the animal, turning a once majestic predator into a ticking time bomb. For SeaWorld, the tragedy was a public relations nightmare. The park faced renewed scrutiny over its practices, with activists pointing to Tillicum's violent history as evidence of the dangers of captivity. Yet, for all the outrage, the central question remained unanswered. What had driven Daniel Dukes to such a reckless act? As the waters of Tillicum's tank grew still, the horrors of that night served as a grim reminder. The real tragedy of captivity begins long before the attacks. It starts when these majestic creatures are taken from the wild and thrust into lives of performance, far from their natural world. The consequences of this captivity often go unseen, but they can be devastating. Namu's story, long before Tillicum's, was one of the first to reveal this heartbreaking reality, forcing us to confront the cost of captivity and humanity's treatment of the wild. It was 1965 when a remarkable event occurred off the coast of British Columbia near a small town called Namu. A young orca, tangled in a massive salmon net, was pulled from the ocean and into a world far removed from the wild waters he knew. His name was Namu, and his story would soon become one of the most controversial chapters in the history of orca captivity. Namu's life began as a member of the C1 pod, part of the northern resident orca community that had thrived for centuries in the Pacific Northwest. However, fate would soon take a darker turn. Discovered by a fisherman named William Lacobie, Namu was sold to Ted Griffin, the owner of the Seattle Marine Aquarium. Griffin saw a lucrative opportunity, not just to house the orca, but to turn him into the star of large shows, drawing in crowds, earning big money, and selling tickets. And so, Namu's tragic journey from the wild to captivity was set in motion. What followed would both captivate and horrify the world. Upon arriving in Seattle, Namu quickly became the star attraction at Griffin's Aquarium. For the first time, the world had the chance to witness a live orca up close and personal. His playful behavior, his massive size, and his unflinching companionship with Griffin painted a picture of the killer whale as a gentle giant, a stark contrast to the wild and dangerous creatures often depicted in the media. Namu's presence sparked a wave of public fascination, and the once feared orca became a beloved icon. But what the public didn't see was the price Namu paid for this newfound fame. As his popularity grew, so did the pressures to perform. Namu, now confined to a small pen in Seattle's Pier 56, was subjected to daily routines that were far from natural. He was fed 400 pounds of salmon every day, but his captivity took a toll on his health. The once mighty killer whale who had roamed the open sea was now reduced to a spectacle. Still, Namu's bond with Griffin was undeniable. Their connection, at times seemingly telepathic, captured the imagination of millions. But what the public didn't know was the dark reality behind Namu's life in captivity. In 1966, just before the premiere of Namu, My Best Friend, the orca passed away. The film, released that same year, told a heartwarming and idealized story of a man and his heroic orca. It follows marine biologist Hank Donner, who discovers a wounded orca, later named Namu, stranded on the shore of the Pacific Northwest. The plot centers around Hank's fight to protect Namu from local fishermen, who view the orca as a threat to their livelihood. As the townspeople attempt to harm him, Hank swims with Namu to prove the orca's peaceful nature, ultimately earning the trust of both the animal and the town. The film played a significant role in shifting public perceptions of killer whales, casting them as majestic creatures worthy of protection rather than fear. Behind the scenes, however, Namu's life was far darker. An autopsy revealed he had been suffering from several illnesses, including a bacterial infection, skin rashes, and a stomach infection likely caused by sewage runoff in Elliott Bay, where he had been relocated. Namu's death was tragic, not only because of the suffering he endured, but also because it exposed the hidden consequences of human fascination with these animals. While the movie was meant to showcase the bond between Namu and his human counterparts, the reality was far more sinister. The film painted a picture of an orca who willingly played with children who protected his human friends from harm. But in truth, Namu's life had been anything but idyllic. He was confined to a small pen, isolated from his family, and forced to perform for the entertainment of others. The film's release, which should have been a celebration of Namu's life, was instead overshadowed by the painful reality of his death. The public outpouring of grief following Namu's death was immense. Thousands mourned the loss of the orca who had captured their hearts. However, Namu's death also sparked an important conversation about the ethics of keeping killer whales in captivity. In the years that followed, the world began to question whether the price of human entertainment was worth the suffering of these magnificent creatures. Ted Griffin, who had once seen Namu as a companion, was left to grapple with the consequences of his actions. While he had introduced the world to orcas as intelligent, emotional creatures, he had also played a part in their exploitation. Griffin would later go on to advocate for the release of captive orcas, but the damage had been done. Namu's story had served as a harsh reminder that humans had underestimated the needs and complexities of the animals they sought to control. Today, Namu's name is remembered not just as a movie title, but as a symbol of the change he helped bring about. While the film may have told a fairy tale of a human-orca friendship, the reality of Namu's life was far more complex. His death was a tragic reminder that entertainment should never come at the cost of an animal's well-being. As Namu's story sparked the first wave of change, it was only the beginning of a larger conversation about captivity. Soon, the world's attention shifted to Keiko, the orca known to many as Siji. His life, echoing Namu's struggles, would reveal the darker truths of life in captivity. This is the tragic story of Keiko and the toll captivity took on him. Keiko was born in the wild off the coast of Iceland around September 24, 1976. He was just a toddler when his world was violently upended. In 1979, a whaler named Joe Gunnarsson and his team, working for the whaling company, attacked Keiko's family. The orcapod, which had likely roamed the cold waters of the North Atlantic for generations, was torn apart, and Keiko was captured. At only 3 years old, he was taken to a small aquarium in Iceland, far from the ocean and family he knew. He was given the name Siji and eventually Keiko, the name he would carry through the rest of his tumultuous life. Keiko's early years in captivity were nothing short of distressing. His new home, a tiny, barren tank at a theme park near a remote town in Iceland, was a far cry from the vast open waters of his homeland. As he grew, his living conditions worsened. The small, confined space did little to accommodate his natural instincts and behavior. For years, Keiko performed tricks for audiences, living a life of entertainment that starkly contrasted his life in the wild. Despite the apparent cheerfulness of the shows, something was deeply wrong. Keiko was far from home, his health deteriorating, and the calls for his release grew louder. In 1982, after his time in Iceland, Keiko was sold to Marineland in Ontario, Canada. There, he was thrust into a larger facility, performing for bigger crowds. Yet, the challenges continued. His skin began to show signs of stress, developing painful lesions likely caused by the poor conditions and chemicals in the water. Keiko struggled to fit in with the older female orcas in the facility, as he had not been part of their pod from the beginning. His attempts to interact were met with aggression, and he became a solitary, broken creature. Marineland, unable to address the issue, sold him again in 1985. Keiko's new home was Reno Aventura in Mexico City. The conditions here were perhaps the worst yet. At only 10 feet long, he was housed in a tank built for dolphins, a far cry from the space he needed. His growing body, now reaching 21 feet, barely fit in the cramped enclosure. The tank was only 65 feet wide and 22 feet deep. The water temperature was far warmer than Keiko could tolerate, and the tank was filled with chlorine, a harsh chemical that irritated his skin. To save money, the park owners used salt water instead of natural seawater, further exacerbating his condition. Keiko was forced to perform up to 5 times a day despite his deteriorating health. He was a showpiece, a commodity that earned money but at the cost of his well-being. Despite the harsh environment, Keiko remained gentle. His spirit, though fractured by years of captivity, still showed remarkable resilience and compassion. In 1993, Keiko's life changed forever when he became the star of Free Willy. The film told the heartwarming story of a young boy named Jesse who fought to free his captive orca friend, Willy. Keiko's portrayal of Willy resonated deeply with audiences worldwide, transforming him from an anonymous captive orca into a global symbol of hope and freedom for marine animals. The film's powerful message struck a nerve, but it also divided opinions. For many, Free Willy was an inspiring tale that celebrated the bond between humans and animals, sparking a wave of admiration for orcas like Keiko. However, others saw the movie as deeply troubling, believing it highlighted the very exploitation it sought to condemn. Critics argued that using a real captive orca to tell a story about freedom was ironic if not devastating, and called attention to the ethics of keeping such intelligent creatures in captivity for entertainment. Keiko's real-life story mirrored Willy's in many ways, further deepening the public's emotional connection to him. This connection sparked an unprecedented movement. Over 300,000 people called, wrote letters, and signed petitions demanding Keiko's release. To them, Keiko had become more than just a movie star. He was the living embodiment of the freedom Willy achieved on screen. But while the world rallied around him, the harsh truth about Keiko's life painted a far darker picture. Far from the vibrant, playful creature portrayed in Free Willy, Keiko was severely overweight by the time the movie hit theaters. His lesions had worsened, he had developed stomach ulcers, and his immune system was compromised. He was barely able to perform. Even the $75,000 he earned for his role in the film, a sum that could have provided much-needed care, was pocketed by his owners instead of being used to help him. Yet the calls for his release continued, and soon a solution began to form. In 1995, the Free Willy Keiko Foundation was established. Led by Warner Brothers and the International Marine Mammal Project, the foundation worked tirelessly to raise funds for Keiko's freedom. Over $7 million was raised, with contributions coming from generous benefactors and millions of school children. With this money, a plan was set in motion to rehabilitate Keiko and, if possible, return him to the wild. In January 1996, Keiko was moved from Mexico to the Oregon Coast Aquarium in Newport, Oregon. For the first time in his life, Keiko lived in a tank with seawater, and conditions were significantly better. He stayed there for 8 months, regaining some of his strength he had lost during his years of captivity. His weight increased and he became healthier, but the ultimate goal was to prepare him for his return to the wild. Preparations for Keiko's release began in earnest in 1998. On September 9th, he was flown to Kivik Bay, a small island off the coast of Iceland. Keiko's rehabilitation was a careful, gradual process. He was trained to swim long distances and to learn how to hunt for food on his own. He was fitted with a satellite transmitter and supervised swims in the open ocean began. Keiko was learning to become the orca he had once been, reconnecting with his natural instincts. After 17 long years in captivity, Keiko was ready for the ocean. In the summer of 2002, the moment everyone had waited for arrived. Keiko was released into the wild off the coast of Iceland. It was a historic event, the first time a captive orca was returned to the open ocean. Initially, Keiko swam freely in the open waters, spotted in the bay for days. But as the weeks passed, something unexpected occurred. Keiko, despite his newfound freedom, still sought out human company. He remained close to the bay, often interacting with people. Although he sometimes swam with wild orcas, he never fully integrated with them. In December 2003, Keiko, now 27 years old, was found swimming in the bay in Norway when he succumbed to pneumonia. His passing was the tragic end of a long, complex journey, one that had started with hope but was ultimately too much for him to overcome. Thank you for joining us as we explored these chilling encounters with orcas, a sobering reminder of the immense risks of working with such powerful creatures. But this is just the beginning. In our next story, we uncover the tragic final moments of Alexis Martinez, a seasoned orca trainer whose routine session at Loro Park ended in horror before a packed crowd. The orca he trusted suddenly attacked, leaving onlookers frozen in shock. What led to this devastating event? Click through to find out.